This evolved from a sermon that I had planned on evangelism to then it was, what am I going to do for Bible class? Because we're in between things now. So I thought, well, we'll talk about evangelism for that. And then it turned into, well, tonight we'll just go ahead and do it again. So today is going to be a focus on evangelism. And we just had a couple of people go to a evangelism seminar for a week. So that's a very good coincidence that helps. And all of us we all know a little bit about it, and we're all interested in it, hopefully. I want you to think about where we are as a congregation. Look around where we are. You know, the people that are going to do evangelism are more than likely 90% or 99% are in this room right now. This is what we have to work with. It's not something that we should be discouraged about because we all can do our parts, but if you're not even willing to come to a Bible class, the chances of you getting out and going into the community and taking risk is a lot less. So think about that when we start thinking about all the stuff that we can do, and consider that it's not as likely to happen in a big scale like we'd love for it to, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had 65 or 70 people ready to go and spread the gospel tomorrow? And eventually we may, but today we have us. And I'm not discouraging or I'm not trying to speak evil of the people that are not here. Some people are not here because they're sick or because of other various reasons. And sometimes people need to grow a little bit more. And they still may be participating in this, but realistically, we know how things work, and that is that if we look around at the people in Bible class or Wednesday night, we're seeing the people who are the workers, and so keep that in mind as you're thinking about what we can do to evangelize. And we work with the people who are willing, right? And that's all we can do. This isn't an army. This is a volunteer army, and we work with the people who are willing, and we will grow whatever challenges we face. We can still overcome and grow. So today we're going to look at some principles of evangelism that have been heavy on my mind for a long time. That will hopefully encourage you. You can see some of the things that we're doing here. And do you have that? We do. Okay. So the evangelism process is, especially for Caddo Mills, when I first met with the men here before I came, we were talking about what my job would be. And one of the things they said was that I would be heading up, helping to establish an evangelism program and a system for evangelism. That was my first priority. And I got here, and about 4 months later, COVID hit. So you know how that went, right? We all remember how active was the church during COVID? Not really. I'm talking about in general. Most places were shut down for a long time. And the attitude of the people in the community was even worse of, I'm not getting out and doing anything much. Most of them didn't even want to go to work, much less come to a Bible class or something, have a Bible study, because it's too risky. We may die. And of course, that's what we thought at the time, right? Not running that down, but we learned better later, but some people did die, but it wasn't nearly as bad as was projected. But that threw us for a loop. Then we started back up again. I sent the elders earlier this year, maybe even the end of last year, I sent them a letter, and I said, let me explain the situation here. This is what I was asked to do. The elders are still supporting that idea. I said, we had COVID, that really threw everything off. We were just trying to survive at that point. After that, we started going again, and we kind of took a detour to do some other things, which in evangelism, which is fine, because that's what everyone wanted to do. So we took the detour, And I supported that wholeheartedly. And it's kind of, we still have some things from it, kind of in some ways fizzled, but it is coming back to the point of we need to find a way to be consistently in the communities around us. And the principles that we took from the previous things that we've done are still valid. And some of the activities are still valid. But we have been expanding that. So that's why I wrote the elders a letter. I said, just give me an opportunity to develop this so that we can actually have a good start. We can actually get it done. And they've been willing to do that, so I appreciate that. And this is something that I've been working on. Some of these things I've been working on for years. And you'll see as we go through. But the reason for that is because the reason that I wanted to take the time for this is because this is something that I've been working on, not for 4 years that we've been here. We'll be here 4 years in November. I still can't believe it's 4 years, but not just 4 years of work. This is what I have been trying to figure out and develop for 35 years. Since I was 16 years old, I've been trying to learn how to do evangelism. And at first, I challenged people in the church I was at to go door knocking with me, and I was pretty much the only one that went. And man, I learned a lot of lessons about what not to do and what to do in that short period of time that I actually lasted, because I got discouraged and quit because I couldn't get anybody to help me. Well, since then, I've been trying my best to understand the principles. I've listened to people speak. I've watched videos. I've gone to seminars. I've tried and failed in many things myself, just like many of us have, right? And we've all kind of wanted to make sure that we do something. And here's the biggest problem. Well, let me just put it to you. What do you think in evangelism would be the biggest problem that we have when it comes to getting the work done? Now, this is not a right or wrong answer. I want to see what you think is the biggest problem with evangelism. Sorry? Participation? Okay. That's a big one. Yeah. What else? Zeal. That's a big one. Most of the time when I talk about evangelism, it's just to get us encouraged and kind of pump us up a little bit, right? Because it's difficult work, and it's something that's very easily, we can get discouraged very easily because we don't see things happening the way we'd like for them to. That's reality. In other places, it's different. I mean, you go to Africa and you have Bible studies all day long without even trying. I mean, you just walk up to people and knock on their hut. You will have a Bible study if you want. That's not the way it is here. So it is easily discouraging. Anything else? Okay, methodology. That's a big one, especially if you're not really sure. And the great thing about this is my grandma used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I don't know why you skin cats, but still there's more than one way to do it. And there are many methods to this, and that's actually an advantage that we have. Did you have one, Robert? Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things there. One is it's not a high enough priority for us. And two is maybe we don't love people the way we should, right? And that could be an indictment. It could be. Although I think I think most of us would willingly admit that we do love people and we do want to do better, right? So it's not really that, but at the same time, it is that, because if we want, love is about priorities, and or at least includes priorities. And here's my perspective, and I may be wrong too. It seems that our biggest problem is that we expect to do a little work and have a lot of results. And it's completely backwards. We're going to do a lot of work and have a little results. And sometimes we can't handle that idea because we don't want to do a lot of work. And part of that mentality, though, is because of our culture. We have a microwave culture, right? We want to do a little bit here. We push a button, and everything pops. You put popcorn in the microwave. You push a button that says popcorn, and all of a sudden you got all this popcorn, right? That's what we want, but that's not reality. And so it's very difficult for us. But we also, related to that, though, we have, and please understand, I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm saying that sometimes the perspective that we have needs to shift. We get into the mentality of the campaign mentality. Now, campaigns are wonderful in their context, in the right context. The campaign mentality is not wonderful. The campaign mentality is once a year, we're going to focus for 2 weeks and get as many people as we can. That's not a great way to evangelize. It's a great way to find some low-hanging fruit now and then, but that's not a great way to evangelize. I tell you what, it's better than nothing. I'm not besmirching it, but it should fit into a context of a larger scope. When it fits into a larger scope context, it's going to be better. This is what I've learned. Now, I remember reading from a book, an autobiography. I can't remember the man's name. I've mentioned him before. He wrote it in the early 1800s, and he was regularly going and having tent meetings for 3 weeks at a time and baptizing between 100 to 300 people per campaign. And he was very successful. And that was a lot more common back then than we have here. But even among the common things like that, he was pretty successful at it compared to other people. And he was talking about the reason he was successful. And he said, the reason I was successful is not because I came in for 3 weeks or 1 week or whatever, however long it was, and preached such magnificent sermons that people just came weeping down the aisles. He said the reason it was successful is because before I went to a place, they had been working for 6 months before I got there. He said, they didn't work for 6 days, they worked for 6 months. And when I got there, it was the culmination of work that they had been doing in that small community. And when he said, for me, it was just icing on the cake. I just walked in, I preached the sermons, and people started coming forward. I didn't do anything. The work was already done. And that's where I think we have to start thinking longer-term perspectives, right? And really, so there's 5 principles that I want to share with you that is, in my understanding, and this is what I was tasked to do, so that's the reason I'm doing it my way, is because this is the only way I think that I know how to make it work. These are the 5 principles of what evangelism is based upon that we're doing, and we actually are doing. I know sometimes you may look around and say, we're not doing anything. It's not true at all, and I'll show you that as we go through. The 5 foundational principles. The first one is farming over hunting. Now, we all know the difference between farming and hunting, right? When evangelism, what is an example of hunting when you're doing evangelism? Go a random person, randomly talk to them, asking them for a Bible study or something like that, right? Okay. Anything else? It could be, yeah, it could be. Typically, what I mean by hunting is that we're just walking around looking for anyone who wants to have a Bible study, however that works. And now, I'm not saying that that's wrong. And in fact, in some ways, that's a positive thing. We see that in the book of Acts. They did that. There's no question about that. But it was a little bit more complex than simply saying they just went to an area and started preaching the gospel. It was a little more complex than that. But it is something that we see. So hunting would be like, we're going to have a campaign, or we're going to just, we get excited, we're going to go evangelize, so we go knock doors, or we go evangelize, we want to go evangelize, we ask all of our friends and family to have Bible study. And then, that has some merit, and it works to some degree. Typically, what you're doing when you're hunting is you're getting what I call low-hanging fruit. And that is, it's the ones that are easy. They're ready to be picked. They're ready to be found. There's always somebody somewhere who's willing to at least have a Bible study. And do we want to miss them? Absolutely not. We want to get them too. So that's why I'm saying it's not wrong to do it that way. But this is typically how we've done it for decades. And as far back as I remember, it's always been a concept of we do our evangelism once a year. And that has changed to some degree, but it's definitely has room for improvement. And even things that I've read from past generations, they say the same thing. Go ye means go me. Have you ever read that book before? It was written back in the 1950s, I think. I read it as a teenager. First book I ever read on evangelism. And it's a wonderful read. It's a great book. Very motivational. In fact, he also gives in there how to do Bible studies. I mean, it's just, he even has lists of the Bible study program that he uses in that. And it's a wonderful program. And it means go ye means go me. I can't remember the author. It's a good book, but there have been lots of books written about it. But that was the mentality that we had. In fact, he recommended having a campaign for 3 weeks. And you're going through the phone book, calling people up, asking them to come to the gospel meeting. You had a lot of different things that you can do to bring people together for one kind of event. And it did have some success. Yes, Ivan Stewart. Yeah. I would recommend it if you want to get some good information. There are a lot of other good books out there related to that too. Bobby Bates has some great stuff out there. We even have some that was given when we had our campaign training last year by Rob Whitaker. There's some good books we have in the library, actually, some good stuff. But when we have that mentality by itself, we're missing the boat. So this is the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and it is the idea of farming versus hunting. Now, we know the difference automatically, but let me explain a little bit more what I mean by farming versus hunting. Hunting, you're looking for people who are already ready. Farming means you're helping people to develop to the point that they will be ready. And then you can harvest. That's a big difference in mindset. And it's one that I want to encourage us to be. Now, we can do both, but really, in fact, if you look in, let me find the passage. I believe it's John 4. Yeah, this is going to be John chapter 4. And let's start at verse 35. And this is a great verse to use to talk about evangelism. He says in verse 35, "Do you not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest." Now, at any given time, that could be true. It's not necessarily true, though, because look at what he says in verse 36. Now, for him, where he was saying it, it was true. There's no question about it. Jesus didn't tell a lie. It says in verse 36, "He who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together." Now, notice the two kinds of people that are in this category that he's in this verse. What are the two kinds of people? The people who do reaping and the people who what? Sowing. Do those happen at the same time? No. One comes before the other, and sometimes a long time before the other. In fact, he says in verse 37, "In this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored." Now, were they laboring in the reaping? Were they putting forth effort? Yes. What were they doing? They're going out preaching and teaching. What was the message of Jesus, by the way? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And they were explaining what the kingdom was. They were talking about how people need to come. So there was a lot of work that they were doing. They're going from village to village to village. That was their message. What had they been learning before that? They've had to learn some things about the kingdom, about the fact that the kingdom is coming, some of the signs of the coming of the kingdom. There were a lot of things that they had to learn for them to be ready to hear the message, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So there was some sowing and some reaping. And he said in verse 38, "I sent you to reap for that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors." Okay, so who are the others? We don't know. We can imagine, though, Jesus might be some of the others, because this is still kind of early in his ministry, so probably not. Who would somebody else in your mind that might spring up as someone who is sowing? The prophets, John the Baptist. How much impact did John the Baptist have on the community? Everyone in the area came to be baptized by him. What was his message, by the way? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Same thing. But that was work that was done. Also, other prophets have been doing. Acts chapter 15 and verse 21 says that for generations, Moses and the prophets have been heard. How often? You remember? Every Sabbath. For generations. Is that sowing? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. So there are a lot of people who are sowing, and then we have Jesus who says, look, this is the time to reap. Now, what if I took you out here and said, one day I'm going to have a garden out here, and I'm going to plant corn. And then I turn around the next day and say, okay, let's go harvest. Well, you would think I was dumb, right? We haven't even planted yet. But how do we expect to have a harvest if we haven't had any planting time? And let me ask you, I don't mean to imply anything about anyone's motives or anything like this when I ask this question, but think about this. Which one receives more glory? The one that plants or the one that harvests? Harvesters. It's much more difficult for us to find people who are willing to plant because everybody gets to see when I reap. They get to count how many baptisms I've had. They get to count how many people have responded to the gospel. And I'm not suggesting that people do it for the wrong motives. I'm saying that because of that, we have a difficult time getting people to understand that there's a time of planting, and that's just as important as reaping. Wouldn't you agree? It is. So that's the idea. So farming means that we're spending time. Now, here's the thing. We all know that if you plant seeds. I'm going to illustrate this by distance here. But if you plant seed, you spend... Now, we know physically and spiritually it's different. But spiritually speaking, we plant some seed, and it takes this long to see a harvest. Okay? So what typically we do is we try for a little while. This is how I did it. We try for a little while. We don't see results. So we quit. And then time goes by, and then all of a sudden, we see a few results. Like, oh, wait a minute. What I did actually worked. So the next time, we do it, and we try a little bit longer so that we're hoping to keep working until we see that result, but then we get discouraged and quit. But eventually, we get to where we're doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until the time of harvest. And then we see it, it's like, wow, right, it's working, and we're still doing the work. And then what do? Typically, we stop doing the work of planting because now we're enjoying the harvest. Okay, the only bad thing about that is once you have the harvest, what else are you waiting for? There's nothing else to come because we're not planting anymore. You don't have harvest without planting. So the trick that I've learned is you plant, you water, you help, you encourage, you start seeing results. The trick is to not get tricked into thinking, okay, I can quit now. You keep planting because when this harvest time is over, you still need to keep planting because if you've been planting all along, you're going to start seeing more and more harvests. That's how it works. So it's farming over hunting. And that's the reason that we get in trouble when we have the mentality of the only way to approach evangelism is through the campaign mentality. Campaigns have wonderful effects. When in this process, here to here is the most logical place to have a campaign. Right here, in the harvest. When the people are ready. That's the best time to have a campaign because then we're going to be more effective. We can get more people quicker. Because when you start having a big harvest, there's only so much you can do, right? As a person, if you're planting seed and over time you're also reaching more and more people, hopefully, when you start having opportunities to baptize people, how many Bible studies can you legitimately do in a day? Depends on who you are, right? If you have a full-time job and taking care of a family, the likelihood of you being able to do 12 Bible studies in a day is pretty small. But we could have 12 people doing one Bible study. That's why you have a campaign. A campaign that's divorced from the farming is not really that effective because there hasn't been much seed planted, okay? Now, there's always been seed planted. God is always active, but we can be more effective. That's the idea. So that's the principle I'm trying to base this all on. The next one is discipling, and we know the difference. I've talked about a lot about this, and everyone understood it already before I said anything about it. The difference between discipling and converting. We baptize people so that they will become Christians, and they would be forgiven of their sins. But we disciple people because we want them to go to heaven. Is it possible for you to be baptized and forgiven of your sins and still not make it? Yes, absolutely. The discipling process doesn't stop when they're baptized. And because it doesn't stop when they're baptized, we need to make sure we don't treat it as such. And the way you do that is to, before you ever baptize them, you're already teaching them what it means to be a disciple. And when they're baptized then, we have the expectation that this is just one step in the right direction. It's a big step. It's a step in the right direction. What do they need to do after that? They need to keep stepping and taking another step and growth. Is that part of discipleship? Yes. That's what discipleship is. We grow, we continue to grow, we encourage each other to grow. That's why I say this probably so much y'all get sick of hearing it from me, that we need to continue to grow. Because we as humans don't typically think that way. We think, I've already accomplished so much with my life. Wonderful. You can't get to heaven based upon what you used to do. We go into heaven based upon our relationship with God right now. And our relationship with God also depends upon our decision to continue to grow and expand in the spiritual realm. The next one is that it's multifaceted. This means that it's sophisticated, you can put it that way. Multifaceted. The only reason it should be multifaceted is because, would you describe our world as complicated? Definitely. Especially in this culture that we're in with the melting pot. This melting pot that we're in, it's full of all kinds of ideas and cultures that are all mixed together. You go from one door to the next, and you may have very, very different things happening in those families. So it needs to be multifaceted. It also needs to be multifaceted because we have complicated things. People are, in some ways, inoculated against Christianity. When when you inoculate someone against a disease, how does that typically work? You take a piece of the disease that's not harmful, and you put it in a syringe and you give it to somebody, and their body builds antibodies to fight it. I'm not suggesting that Christianity is a disease, but would you agree that most people in the world around us have a very limited and skewed view of what Christianity is? Yeah. Just enough to make them say, I don't want anything to do with it. That's what Satan has effectively done. And there are plenty of bad things that we could focus on that would discourage us if we let it. Especially if we've just been kind of spoon-fed ideas. And who is spoon-feeding the ideas? Media, movies, music, everywhere. It's everywhere. And in many, many different ways. So we need a multi-pronged approach. Not just one way to approach, but many ways to approach, because we might not get them with one, but we can get them with another, perhaps. At least we can start a conversation. So that's the idea here, multifaceted. Also, I've learned that it needs to be strengths or talents based. Is that a biblical concept? Can you think of an example of a teaching about using your strengths or talents? Okay, Barnabas played a role. Jesus taught about the parable of the talents, right? The parable of the talents is not just about evangelism, but it is about it. Paul's teaching about the church says that we are all one part doing the same thing. No. In fact, in 2 different books, he says we're many parts with many functions. You will do different things than I will because you're better at them than I am. And you have opportunities that I don't have, and vice versa. But the tendency that we have is to all do the same thing because we can encourage each other in doing that. And of course, there are a lot of things that we will do that are the same. I'm not saying we're all separate. Our work should be encouraging each other to continue on in the work, whatever that is, whatever capacity that is. So that's part of what this is about, the strengths, talent space. And also, if I can say this without insulting anyone, I don't mean it this way, but we need to have some things that anyone can do but for those people who think that they can do nothing. Because there are plenty of Christians who think I can't do anything at all. And so I try to create some things that in the multifaceted approach that I can say, I know you can at least do this. Because then perhaps that may be the only thing they can do, but perhaps they'll see that, oh, maybe I can do something else later. So it's based on strengths and talents. We all grow, right? So if you're a one-talent person, does God expect for you to take that one talent and increase it? Absolutely. How do we do that? Practice, trying things that we've never tried. That's the only way you can do it. And how do you do that? You have to have an environment that's safe, that allows you to make mistakes without getting browbeaten and dismissed and disfellowship because you made a mistake. And that may sound strange to say that kind of thing, but I've been in congregations where if you made a mistake, you were in trouble. Well, nobody likes to see mistakes happen, but we all know they do, right? So strengths and talent-based. And then the last one is scalable. There are some things that we do that are very difficult to scale. For example, having one-on-one Bible studies. How do you scale one-on-one Bible studies? If you can't increase the amount of time you can spend in a week doing Bible studies, the only way you can scale that would be to add more people to the Bible studies. The bigger the group gets, are you more or less effective with the individuals? Less effective. The best effect that you can have is one-on-one. I think that's pretty indisputable. That doesn't mean that you can't do larger groups, but you got to find, even in larger groups, you got to find ways to talk to the individual, and then you'll have discussions afterwards. So that's really difficult to scale. The way you actually would scale that one-on-one mentality would be to have more and more people involved. Okay, that's what we have to face. But there are other things that we can do that scale very easily, that you can increase the number of people that you're interacting with very, very little effort, more effort on your part. It won't need any more manpower. It won't need any more finances or anything like that. Now, what's the problem with that as far as effectiveness goes? This is an interesting situation. The least scalable thing an activity is, the least scalable it is, the more effective it is. The most scalable, the least effective. Does that mean that there's no affection? That there's no effect? No. It has an impact, but it's not nearly as much as the one-on-one studies, which is the most impact we can have. So based on that, here are the ideas that have been being brought forth that I've been working on, for a long, long time, but especially putting in progress here. And this is a scale that's based on something I learned several years ago about a scale of effectiveness in communication. So it's based on that. First of all, we have, I can hardly read that. That's why I have notes right here. We have this is a scale. The highest that you can have, as far as, let me see if I have a thing here. Yes, the highest effectiveness is this. IRL means in real life. That is, in real life with food. That's an interesting one. We communicate better over a sandwich than in any other way. That's because we're human beings. What does it mean when you're eating with somebody? There's openness. Have you ever had someone you couldn't stand ask you to dinner? I have. Do you know how much I ate? Very little. My stomach was upset the whole time. If you can actually eat with somebody, there's trust. Okay? These are, so that we have that. We're going to go through these. I don't want to go too much, but we have in real life, we have in real life connections. That's just basically the same thing, just without the food, which is very, very good. Even though it's not the absolute best, it's still very, very high. Video calls, phone calls, AV messages, text messages, mailers, and flyers. These are simply related to how we communicate as humans and levels of trust that we have, okay? Now, you might think, okay, if we're going to have a multifaceted approach, it might actually make sense for us to have something in all the categories. I'm glad you think that way, because it's exactly what we're doing. Here are the things that we're doing with mailers and flyers, incidentally. First of all, we have the New Movers program. You know, we've had a couple of visitors come over the last 2 years. I think we've had 2, maybe 3 visitors from that. That's great. So people move into the area, we get a list. Every month we get a list. You're signing cards. You're part of that. Most of them are new movers, right? We're sending them a card saying, please come back, come and worship with us. We'd love to have you. Incidentally, probably other churches around are doing similar things. But, you know, at the very least, we're getting out there. And we were doing it a little differently, but we really didn't have the manpower to continue with that. So it's kind of evolved into the cards. We also have the prayer requests, and that is you bring a prayer request for someone, and with their information, you ask them if it's okay if we put them on the prayer list, and then we send them a card. Several days, 5 days a week, they'll get a card for a month. What are we doing? We're just encouraging them. Is it effective? Somewhat. It's not like we're having a Bible study with them. We know that, but it is an impact on people, because at the very least, they say, oh, these are people that actually care about us. We also have the visitor cards. When somebody fills out a visitor card, we send them a letter. We may do other things with them too, but we do send them a letter. They get a letter, and it's saying, thank you for being a part of our services here. Please come back. We also have the door hangers. This is something that's new that I'd been planning for a long time, and just started. We're in week 7, run into a little bit of a hiccup. By the way, if you're hanging things out, Last week you didn't get much because, if anything, because our printer broke. We have that straightened out, but Andrew and I were out Friday evening, and I'm walking from door to door, all we're doing is hanging stuff on doors, not doing anything wrong. And I'm walking down the road, and a police car comes up with his lights on. It says, "You need to stop." I said, "I'm not doing anything wrong. The city told me I could do it." He said, "That's fine. I don't care if you do it or not. But we get calls every time you're out." I said, "They're calling you because I'm putting stuff on their doors?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You need to go to City Hall." So I'm going to go to City Hall. They told me it was fine, but I'm going to go to City Hall and get a permit. Okay, that's fine. He said, "You can keep doing it if you want to tonight, but if you don't have the permit and I have to come back, I'm shutting it down." I said, "We'll just finish this street and go home." And we did. You know how discouraging that was? Very, for about an hour. Then I got mad. Nope, nothing should keep us from doing evangelism. If the city doesn't allow us to put stuff on doors, hey, we're going to find other ways to do it. But they're not going to keep us from doing it, thankfully. So we have the door hangers, which will turn into things more lately. Then we have the text messaging and emails. Texting, emails, is going to be a little bit better than putting stuff on somebody's door, because if you give them information, they may read it, but if you text them or email them, they might read it, and you might actually get a conversation going. Okay, that's great. This is what we should be doing. So we have the thing I call Bible Bites. That's when I send out text messages every morning. Some of y'all are actually part of that. I send out text messages usually 5 days a week, and they're just encouragement. That's basically all it is, to just encourage people to have a better day and to think about God. Probably 15% are people in the general area between here, Royce City, and Rockwall. I don't think I have any in Greenville. That believe themselves to be Christians, but most likely aren't. And although we haven't had a lot of conversation, I don't think they go to the church. But about 15%. The rest of them are already Christians. No, I shouldn't say the rest of them. I have 2 or 3 that actually, one that says, "I'm not a Christian at all. I just want some motivation." It's okay. I'll be glad to help. So what are we doing? We're reaching people. Do you know, at any given time, I'll have 10 to 15% responses in any given day. Every single day, I get text messages. Usually it's thank you or a heart or something, but sometimes I'll get questions. Sometimes I'll have people say something that gives me an opportunity to say more. And you know how hard it was? There's 131 people on my list right now. Every time I put it out on Facebook or somewhere else, I usually add 4 or 5 to it. It takes a little bit of time in the mornings. The biggest part of my of that is actually coming up with the ideas of what to say. Text it, put it into a program that I have, and it pops up a text message to that person, and I hit send. And then the next one pops up, and I hit send. And the next one pops up, and I hit send. It takes me about 10 minutes every morning. And that's something that I think is encouraging to people. It's helpful. That, incidentally, anybody can do. My mother got excited about it because she's been on the list for a long time. Mother's always going to be supportive of their sons. And if I had one person, it'd be her. She said, "I'm going to start doing this, and I'm just going to plagiarize you." I said, "Please feel free." We also have social media posts. Anybody can post things about God on social media. We also have, this is a lot, you can see it's a different color because this is not something we actually are doing right now, but it's in my plans. I'm hoping for email groups, and there are many, many ways to approach that. So many different ways. We also have the audio-video messaging. This is things like podcasts, which we're not doing right now. I was doing that for a while. Consistency is not that big a deal except for editing. It took me, hours to edit a podcast, and I don't have hours, so I had to kind of give it up. Incidentally, some people can't do the audio part, but they can do the editing, and if that's you, let's talk. We have audio texting, which is not a thing, but it is a thing we can do. It's just like text messages, but we can send an audio clip instead. We have online worship, which people do watch, and we can promote even more. We have social media videos that we're doing. I'm doing quite a bit. It's been a few weeks since I've done them, but I just took a little bit of a break is all. You can do that as well. Instead of doing it on my page, from now on I'm going to start doing it on the church's page to help get the recognition out there. I did it on my page because it's easier to join groups as a person than it is as a company, and they would call us a company. We have stuff on YouTube that we can send to people. We have links. You know, every time I'm up here speaking or anyone is up here speaking, we have it on YouTube. And you can send links to friends. You can make it your ministry. I knew one person that just every week he would give a synopsis basically of the sermons and stuff from the week and send an email with links to them, to a large list that he had created. DVD sharing is something. We have DVDs in the back. People are using that to pass around the community. Are these effective? Yes, they're effective. The problem with them is that you don't have much interaction, but it's still better than text messaging. The next one is phone calls, and this is something we're not doing at all, which we could, and that would be permissive phone calls, not scammy telemarketing things, but you know, I can imagine someone seeing online, hey, call for information about this. And if they're interested in that, they can make a phone call, or they might give us the information. Was that already 5 minutes? We have devotional, would be the next one. I'm going to finish this up. We also have video calls. This would be things like Zoom studies. I've done some in the past, not very difficult. It's just about having it, posting it, talking about it a little bit. Support groups. You know, I've had people in the community ask me to do support groups. I can't do them. I don't have the time. But I've had people come to me and say, I'm mourning the loss of a loved one. I could really use a support group right now. So let me see what I can do, and I haven't been able to do it. Is it an opportunity? Yeah. We have a lot of opportunities, do a lot of things. Is that helpful? Yes. You know, you can help someone be a better person and learn to deal with their feelings and things, and also introduce the gospel in time. We also have the In Real Life Connect. This is what we do a lot of. We have the Creamery. We have the Senior Citizens in Roy City, which is going to be going again hopefully soon. We have Class and Worship, which is an obvious one we can invite people to. We're going to start doing door knocking very soon. We're going to have, we have booths that we do every year, at least one, sometimes 2 or 3. So these are important opportunities for us to have conversations. And you can see that with all of these, they have various degrees of impact, but they're still there. We also have potluck, by the way, if you want to, in real life, connect with food. I know everyone knows this, but did you know that you can actually invite friends to come to church to have potluck? And the chances of them coming to eat food are probably better than they're coming without the food. We also have game nights, which are very good for us. And, you know, it's also okay to have friends that are not Christians that you have fun with. It can actually be helpful. And then we also have other events that we're part of. See, we have a lot of options, a lot of available opportunities that other people are doing too, but I'm very busy trying to build and support and let each of those sections grow so that we can impact people the best that we can. And the great thing about this is that all of these, we have room for your ideas, things that you want to do, and for your talents and strengths can fit in somewhere in all of these categories. I just want to be an encouragement to you and let you see. I was talking to Carl about this, and I said, you know, I think people don't even realize all the opportunities that we have. There are lots and lots of opportunities. And the more we grow, the more opportunities we're going to have. So don't ever think, well, the only thing I know how to do is this. But hey, you can do that and still be very effective because we'll be working as a team. Anyway, thank y'all very much for letting me ramble on with that, and appreciate your listening.